Think you know what medieval people did behind closed doors? Think again. The bedroom lives of medieval Europeans were simultaneously more restricted and more scandalous than anything Hollywood has ever shown you. And today, we're diving deep into the intimate world of medieval relationships, from wedding night rituals that would make you cringe, to church-approved positions, to the surprising ways people found pleasure in an age of extreme religious control. Now, before we start, this is going to be a mature, educational discussion about historical intimacy. We're talking about real history here, the kind they definitely didn't teach you in school. So if you're easily offended or under 18, maybe come back to this one later. We'll explore everything from what medieval bedrooms actually looked like, to the bizarre medical beliefs about sex, to how different social classes approached intimacy completely differently. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why medieval people were both more repressed and more openly sexual than you ever imagined. First, let's talk about where medieval intimacy actually happened. Forget the romantic castle bedrooms you see in movies. Most medieval people lived in one-room houses with their entire family, plus any servants or boarders. We're talking about spaces that were maybe 20 feet by 20 feet, housing anywhere from 8 to 15 people. For 90% of medieval people, the peasants, there was no such thing as a bedroom. The entire family slept in the main room of their house, which was also where they cooked, ate, worked, and stored their belongings. Picture trying to have an intimate moment with your spouse while your children, your parents, your brother's family, and possibly a few farm animals are all sleeping within arm's reach. Privacy as we know it didn't exist. Even noble families, who had the luxury of separate chambers, couldn't count on being alone. Servants could enter at any time, they had keys and considered it their duty to attend to their lord's needs around the clock. There were no locks on bedroom doors, no "do not disturb" signs, no concept of personal space. Medieval houses were built for survival, not romance. Stone walls were thick for defense, windows were small to keep out cold, and rooms were designed for multiple purposes. Even in castles, what we'd call a bedroom was really a multi-purpose chamber where the lord conducted business, received guests, and yes, slept with his wife. The actual marriage bed was often the most expensive piece of furniture a family owned. For nobles, these beds were massive structures, sometimes 8 feet wide and equally tall, with elaborate wooden frames carved with family crests and religious symbols. They were draped with heavy curtains not for romance, but for warmth and the tiny bit of privacy it provided. Medieval beds were nothing like modern mattresses. They were basically wooden frames with rope supports, topped with straw mattresses that had to be rest-stuffed regularly. The wealthy might have feather mattresses, but even those were lumpy and uncomfortable by our standards. Sheets were made of rough linen that was changed maybe once a month if you were lucky. Here's something that would shock modern couples: medieval beds were semi-public spaces. Important visitors might be received in the bedchamber, business deals were conducted there, and the bed itself was where political alliances were literally consummated. These beds were literally a stage where family business, including producing heirs, was conducted under the watchful eyes of the court. Medieval people went to bed much earlier than we do, usually right after sunset, around 8 p.m. in winter. This wasn't romantic ambience, it was pure economics. Candles were incredibly expensive, a single candle might cost the equivalent of $50 today. Oil lamps were smoky and dangerous. So most intimate encounters happened in complete darkness, which actually aligned perfectly with church teachings about modesty and the sinfulness of looking upon naked bodies. The timing of intimacy was also heavily influenced by seasons. In winter, medieval bedrooms were freezing, literally. Water would freeze in bowls overnight. Couples would wear heavy nightclothes and share beds with warming pans filled with hot coals. Romance took a backseat to survival. Spring and summer offered more comfortable conditions, which is why birth records show clear seasonal patterns. Even wealthy families often shared beds. It wasn't unusual for children to sleep with parents until they were teenagers, and guests were routinely offered a place in the family bed. The idea of a couple having exclusive access to their own sleeping space was a luxury that maybe 1% of the population could afford. Medieval medicine believed that sexual activity was necessary for health, especially for men. According to the four humors theory, men needed to release excess, hot humors through sex, or they would become ill. This created a weird contradiction with church teachings. Surprisingly, medieval medical texts acknowledged female pleasure and even claimed it was necessary for conception. They believed women had to reach climax to get pregnant, which meant that technically, mutual pleasure was medically required. Medieval people had wild theories about conception. Some believed that the position during intercourse determined the baby's gender. Others thought that the woman's level of enjoyment affected the child's temperament. These beliefs actually encouraged attention to female pleasure. Despite church opposition, medieval people definitely practiced birth control. Methods ranged from herbal concoctions to magical amulets to surprisingly effective barrier methods. Midwives and wise women were repositories of contraceptive knowledge. A noble's bedroom experience was vastly different from a peasant's. Nobles had private chambers, fine linens, and servants to heat the room. But they also had much more pressure to produce heirs and maintain political alliances through their marriages. Most noble marriages were arranged, often between people who had never met before their wedding night. Imagine having your first intimate experience with a complete stranger while knowing that your family's political future depends on your performance. Peasants actually had more freedom in choosing partners, but their intimate lives were constrained by poverty and living conditions. They often practiced hand fasting, living together before official marriage, which was technically illegal but widely tolerated. The rising merchant class of the later medieval period created new relationship dynamics. These families had some privacy and money, but also social ambitions that complicated their intimate lives. Despite all the restrictions, medieval people found ways to experience pleasure. Archaeological evidence, confessional records, and medical texts reveal that people engaged in all sorts of activities that the church condemned. The courtly love tradition actually celebrated extramarital romantic relationships. Noble courts were hotbeds of affairs, with elaborate rituals around secret lovers and romantic intrigue. Prostitution was legal in many medieval cities, with official brothels regulated by local authorities. These establishments reveal a lot about medieval attitudes toward sexuality outside marriage. Same-sex relationships existed throughout medieval society, though they were officially forbidden. Records show that such relationships occurred in monasteries, courts, and among all social classes, though they were hidden and rarely discussed openly. Medieval pregnancy was fraught with danger, and intimate relations during pregnancy were both feared and regulated. Different medical traditions gave conflicting advice about sexual activity during pregnancy. Childbirth was a women-only affair, with midwives and female relatives attending. The husband was excluded from the birthing process, which was seen as fundamentally feminine and mysterious. With infant mortality rates around 30 to 40%, medieval families had to balance the need for heirs with the dangers of frequent pregnancy. This led to various forms of family planning, both official and unofficial. Breastfeeding was believed to prevent pregnancy, which was partially true. This led to extended nursing periods and affected intimate relationships. Wealthy families often hired wet nurses partly to resume intimate relations sooner. Medieval romance literature reveals a lot about idealized relationships. These stories often featured passionate love affairs, but they were fantasy rather than reality for most people. Surviving love letters from medieval couples show genuine affection and desire. These personal documents reveal that real emotional and physical intimacy did exist, even in arranged marriages. Medieval birth records show clear seasonal patterns, suggesting that intimate activity varied with agricultural cycles, religious calendar, and social customs. Spring and early summer appear to have been particularly active times. By the late medieval period, there was growing emphasis on personal choice in relationships. This reflected broader social changes and the rise of individualistic thinking. So there you have it, the reality of medieval bedroom life. It was simultaneously more restricted and more creative than we often imagine. Medieval people lived under incredible religious and social pressure, but they were still human beings with desires, emotions, and the need for intimacy. What strikes me most about medieval intimacy is how recognizably human it all is. Despite the different rules and beliefs, people found ways to connect, to experience pleasure, and to express love. They dealt with the same basic human needs we all have. Understanding medieval intimacy helps us appreciate how much our attitudes toward relationships and sexuality have changed, and how much they've stayed the same. Every generation thinks they invented passion, but the truth is, humans have always found ways to be intimate, regardless of what society tells them. What surprised you most about medieval bedroom life? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into medieval history, Make sure to subscribe because we're exploring more surprising aspects of historical daily life. Next week, we're talking about medieval hygiene, and yes, it's going to be gross. Thanks for watching, and remember, history is always